Okay guys, we'll get cracking. Excuse me sitting down, the printer malfunctioned in the office, so I need to have my laptop for my notes, unfortunately. I don't know if it was the printer malfunctioning or me malfunctioning, but it seems to happen to me an awful lot. Okay. So, tonight we're going to do a couple of different things. I wanted to do a bit of a recap on some things that we've done over the last few weeks, but then I also want to move on to talking about participatory libraries. And I'm just going to say right now, I really hate saying the word participatory. It's a really hard word to say, and I'm going to stumble over it about 50,000 times tonight. So, participatory. What is it? Participatory? Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure they'd say participatory or something. Yeah. Okay. I'll go with, oh, you're right. Participatory. I'll go for participatory because that's how it tends to come out the most. Okay, so then we're going to talk about the participatory library and its origins, which will take us into some unusual territory, or what might seem to be unusual territory. I can handle anything that sounds like patisserie, Steph, so that's okay with me. So first of all, I want to do a little bit of administrative stuff. First up, what's due this week? Nothing. Hooray. So yeah, sorry. So yes, nothing due this week. Just to make sure everyone's clear, there's nothing due in the weeks that we have classes. So those weeks you don't, well, nothing for assignment 1 anyway. I also want to mention where we're up to with the weekly learning materials. So I'm working to get those out as far in advance as possible. But I am a pedant, which means that I do change readings from year to year. Sometimes that doesn't happen, but I like to do it. So it takes some time for me to review the material and get it all up. But I'm working to get the remaining weeks out over the next week or so. But having said that, please don't work too far ahead, because over the next couple of weeks we will give you some, you'll start to see things in the community around how people are blogging and those kinds of things. And if you rush ahead and do all your posts, you might find that you end up having to kind of retread ground and refine as your own thinking progresses through the semester. So we have tried to scaffold the work and pace the work across the semester. So just try and stick with us on the pacing. I also wanted to just highlight the change to the schedule. This room's pretty bad for seeing the screen, sorry, so that is teeny tiny. I put up a blog post saying that we needed to switch week 6 and 7 around. Claire and I will both, no, week 5 and 6. Claire and I will both be at the ALIA conference in Adelaide at the beginning of week 6. I will be setting up our conference booth, so I'll probably be doing the Twitter chat from there that night.
I'll be spawning around in South Africa, Australia.
Okay, cool. Well, you Swan, I'll set up booth and Twitter chat. Yes, that's correct. So, yeah, I put a post up on the unit site running through what those changes were, and I have now edited the schedule so it no longer says what it used to be, it just says what it is. So just for maximum clarity. And so we have posts due in the weeks we have Twitter chat, no posts due in the weeks we don't have Twitter chat. Cool. Alrighty, and now I want to do a quiz. Can you read that okay, guys? It's not the clearest. Now for a pop quiz. So you just have to give me a second to get this all working. So those of you at home and in the room, grab a device and we are going to do a little quizzy poll. And we're just doing it this way because sometimes people don't want to fess up to things, but it's easier to fess up when it's anonymous. What is my password? Actually, I'll do it on this one. We're about to go into Yes, you have to include the hyphens. And we're about to go into Twilight Zone screen sharing, 50 million screens on the screen, so be ready for that. Actually, I should close my email before I do that. Whoa! Okay, so if you're playing along at home, no, we're not doing, you can forget the confusion barometer. I'm going to hook you up with something more accurate. Okay, so if you're playing along at home, you just need to join the event with the code, which I have helpfully taken off the screen. I will put it back. Give me one moment. Sorry, what did you say? You've got, what have you got, sorry? That's perfect. That's what you're meant to have. You should just be waiting for me to pop something up on the screen for you. Yep. Has everyone online? Computer is okay. Oh, Paul, thank you. There's the code. Awesome. Leila, you can use your computer. Any device is fine. Yep, it's app.gosoapbox.com. I'm just telling people what the website is to go to. app.go, G-O, soap, S-O-A-P, box.com. I can indeed. It's tiny.
Yeah, I was 569-904-482.
Okay. So I've just released the first question, which is, do you understand what is required for assignment 1? So respond away. Oh, use a fake name. Sorry, I forgot to turn off the name. Okay, everybody hold for a second. Wait, I'll turn off the name settings. This will make everybody happier.
Well, we did on getting it, we can't know that.
Sorry?
Well, we clicked on getting it sent again and we can't know that.
Just give me a minute, because I can't do like several things at once. Although I am a woman and I am fairly good at multitasking generally. Give me a sec. That's right. Okay, let me change the settings. Hang on, everybody. Hang on. Where is it? Oh, come on, system. You still don't have questions on the screen. Okay, hang on, give me a second. That's because I clicked the wrong button. Okay. So the first question is released. Do you understand what is required for assignment 1? Did you log in with the... Nope, you've logged in as yourself instead of logging in with the code. So just log out there. Yep, so click on it. Yep. There you go. Okay. Just play along with those guys. Okay? All right. Okay, so there's several maybes for do you understand what is required for assignment 1, which is sort of concerning. So I'm going to come back to that question in later detail after we've done some more polling. Okay. Next up, have you been commenting on your peers' posts? Yeah. I'm specifically referring to blog posts, but yeah. How many have we got online, Claire? Bottom. Okay, cool. That just gives me an idea of how many to wait for. Okay, so I'm pleased to see that almost 90% of you are commenting on each other's posts. So you do need to engage in the online community. It's part of assignment 1. So that means that you need to be actively reading and commenting on your peers' posts each week. Sorry? So there's links to them on the home page. I'll just quickly show you that now. Yeah. Please hold, there is a question about this coming. Okay, so the latest posts are listed here on the home page. The latest posts from your peers' posts, you'll find the last 10 of them there. Okay, so you can always access them from there. Or you can go to students and student blogs, and then you'll find that your way to individuals' blogs. So students and then student blogs. Okay, so there's a link to it on Blackboard. Yep, on the announcements. No, it's not. There's nothing. None of those menus are switched on Blackboard. Let me show you what it looks like. That's right. So on the announcements, you'll see at the top, there's the first post there is the latest post. There's a link to the registration. If you scroll down, you'll see there's a link there to the website, or you can just use that one. But you should bookmark it and have it up here on your browser. Yeah, so all the things that I need to access every day, I have up along my browser window there. The only menu that's turned on here is Tools, and that's just there in case anybody wants to get to the lecture recordings before Edie puts them online for us. Okay? Alrighty. Okay, so the next question is release, and that question is, have you set yourself a target or benchmark for your contribution to the community? So anyone that has set themselves a benchmark, what number are you aiming for? Or what's your measure? Did I put it in there? I'm so helpful like that. Okay, thank you. That's really nice to hear. So I put in the description, aim for 2 a week, but what we really want you to focus on is quality of contribution rather than quantity. So if you go and write 2 comments that say, nice post, or gee, that was an interesting read, that's not going to give you a pass on your contribution because you're not actually contributing anything. It's not a participation mark, it's a contribution mark. It's about what you contribute to the community. Yeah?
Does it have to be a contribution on someone else's post, or can it be an ongoing conversation on boards? You know, like someone comments on mine and then I say something back.
Yep.
Must it be more for me to, I mean, I know I need to look at other people's posts, but I guess it's a conversation.
Yep, so that's an excellent question. Just for the recording, the question was, can it be an ongoing conversation on my blog? Yes, because if you look at the criteria, there's criteria around leadership and your ability to provoke conversation. So if you're writing a post that engages people in conversation, then that's a really good thing. If you had a post and people were commenting on it and you never got back to them, then no, that's not going to count towards your contribution. But if you're getting in there and making a contribution to discussion, then yeah, that does count. I would also say get out there and read other people's stuff as well though, because it's good for your, to broaden your horizons.
Can we catch up if we accidentally miss a week? Like
Yeah, people miss weeks. Like last week I was sick and I did, nothing but the absolute bare minimum. We all have weeks like that. Just don't have 5 of them in a row.
Well, the way I see it, it's all a little bit cumulative. Like in terms of the participation part,
Yep.
it's kind of cumulative towards the check-in dates that
Yeah.
Dan's got marked out.
Yeah. So we do an overall assessment of contribution at the end of semester, but you will know as you're coming into the check-in point, use those as your kind of points to reassess and go, have I made a big enough contribution so far for the first half of the semester? If not, then maybe you need to really ramp it up in the second half of semester. The other things that count are tweets, conversations on Twitter. Some of you are making an effort to tweet when you've got a new post up, which is really good and a great way to engage people. Those can be things like you might share a link. So Helen's shared a couple of things, Tim shared a couple of things. I think Kylie was having a conversation around program ideas with someone. There's lots of different stuff popping up in that Twitter feed. And so if you monitor the Twitter hashtag and get involved in discussions there, then that's really awesome too. So aim for 2 a week as a minimum, and make sure they don't just say, hey, nice post. And that's how you get your participation marks up. Sorry?
So you're saying comment about 2 people a week and make a decent comment?
Yep, make at least. Yep.
Hey, this is interesting, but what do you think of this?
Or I disagree with this, or I agree with you on this because blah, blah, blah. Yep.
I disagree with this and actually express your idea.
Yeah, absolutely. That's right.
Why I disagree.
Yeah, give your qualification and we're trying to build a sense of community and participation so that everybody's learning from each other. That's kind of the aim, so keep that in mind. Okay. Right. This is a check. Have you signed up for a Twitter Chat Champion Week? Most of you have.
I haven't.
Okay. Well, I'm going to randomly assign you one now. That was my message. If you haven't signed up, I'm assigning you to a week that doesn't have many people in it. I don't think so. I think it's already oversubscribed. So I'll get back to you. So if you haven't signed up for a Twitter Chat Week, I will allocate you. And so far, I think most of you have. Okay. Have you started planning your program and service reviews? Okay, so this is the part where I say it's a really good idea to plan things in advance. Last year, people got into an absolute panic in about week 10 going, oh my God, I can't get a program to align with any of the weeks that are left in the semester. So don't fall into that case. If there's a type of program you want to do, if you want to go to a makerspace, then get yourself ready to do one of the creativity or something weeks towards the end of semester. You can see a question burgeoning.
The program or service that you review has to fit with the topic of that week.
That's correct. But you don't have to go in that week. So you could go to an information literacy program this week and then write about it later.
Kylie and I did a makerspace workshop yesterday, and we're going to write about it, obviously, in week 9.
Yes, quite a way away, yeah.
The one that I'm struggling a bit with is services. I'm having trouble looking at the topics that are coming up and thinking of services that would match.
Okay.
So I'm hoping, though, that as I look at the weekly posts from you, that I'll get some ideas.
Yes, you probably will get some ideas, but you can... Yeah.
And services are a little easier to review.
Yes.
With services, you can kind of just walk in and engage with the service when you're ready.
Absolutely. Yep. Go into a public library and ask them, I like to read these books. What kind of books would you recommend? Go and have a reader's advisory transaction with someone, or so it. Yes. Oh, I haven't read a book for 2 years, but yeah, that's what it is. It's a bit like a mystery shop. So what we wanted to do was the precursor to this unit. You used to have to go and shadow someone on an information desk, either at SLQ or at QUT, which just sounded a little bit boring to me. So I thought, let's go do a mystery shop instead. We've probably all worked in retail and been subject to those. So go and have a look at a service in action. Yeah.
QT site rights as like a tool, and so I'm going to like a talk later for researchers on where to publish, so that would be a service. I was wondering if I've got that right.
You could do QT site right as a service or a tool, yes. And look, the research one, it's grey, right? Nothing kind of fits neatly into, maybe with the exception of story time, which is very much a program, but...
That is research support, the way this is a library, you know, saying, hey, you can publish it.
Yeah. So the umbrella of research support is really a service, and that might be like an event they're running. You could call it a program, you could call it a service. Yeah. So,
I'm going to Theatre tomorrow about wills.
yes.
Researching. So I thought it'd be a research, but I thought it was probably a program.
Yep.
Just an external person.
I would instinctively call it a program. And I'd probably instinctively call your research support one a program as well, but I can live with it being a service. I think it's grey enough, and we're going to have a talk about that in a minute. I think it's grey enough that, yeah, I'm happy with interpretation on them, because it's a little bit arbitrary.
So the Brisbane City Council Archives brochure,
Yep.
probably a service because it's static and it's always there.
Yeah, it's probably a brochure about a service, so that the archives is kind of the service. Yeah, yeah. That sounds probably about as clear as mud to everybody. What we might do is, I'm trying to think of some really cut and dried service examples that aren't reference services.
So what about like home library service
Yes, home library service, perfect.
at public libraries?
Yep.
Older people on mobile.
Yep. And see, the complicating factor there is, in my head I go service, but I know that those services are run out of programming teams. Because what tends to happen in public libraries is anything that isn't kind of frontline customer service in the branch, as in on a desk, gets treated as programming. And it's just kind of an unusual way of how these things are categorised. In practice, I'm probably happy for you to do something that's either a product or a service for your review. That might give you a little bit more flexibility there. Just make sure you do, yeah, we can live with that, can't we? Yeah.
And holds services?
I would call hold services, I would call ebooks a product as a part of the collection. Except that you might call the ebooks, the platform, a service. Again, it's really grey. I mean, there isn't any cut and dried theory around this stuff. So as long as you do at least at least two of the three, so a program, a product, or a service, as long as you cover at least two of those, I can live with it. So if you get really stuck with a program, let us know, and we can work around things. Leela, you could also, so Leela has a good question online. I'm Twitter chat champion in week 6, topic reading and literacy, but this is the week I also wanted to do a program review on baby reading time at Mitchelton. And that would be the best week to do it. You could also do baby reading time in the children and teens week at the end of semester. So that would be okay too. You might just take a children's programming spin on it rather than a strictly literacy spin. Cool. So these things are kind of open to interpretation and massaging. Yeah, we're not going to be super strict about it. We just want you to go and experience a couple of different things, basically, and consider the different categories of experiences that libraries offer.
Can I start with one really quick thing?
Yes.
Sorry.
I'm clicked on in two places.
No, it's okay. I'm just
So
going to speak over your shoulder.
come and be close.
So I guess the one thing that I'm really looking for with your program service or product review is for you to really consider it in a broader context. So we're not doing this for you to go, yep, libraries do really cool stuff. It's not that level of, I went to this and yeah, it was really cool and that was great. So I still want you to consider it critically. Consider, is it an activity that is worthwhile for the library to do? How does it help them engage with their community or their audience? And do support it with some reading or some other evidence to go with it. So if you're looking at baby rhyme time, you might want to consider that within the broader context of the First 5 Forever initiative, like actually put it in its place and be critical. Is this worth should the library be doing this? And if they shouldn't be, then say it.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's not just libraries are cool stuff.
Cool. And if you want to be critical and you're concerned about being critical publicly about something, just don't name exactly what it is. Just talk about it. Yeah. Yeah. Yep, I think it is fair enough to be critical, and I think the industry would be very happy to see that. But some people sometimes have some hesitation about it, and if that's you and you are concerned about that, then we're okay for you to.
Yeah, don't name the library service or don't name the people involved. That's totally
Yep.
fine with me. Happy for you to do library X.
Yeah, we had a lecturer when I did the course who used to talk about State Library X all the time. You can probably remember who it was.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, State Library X over the river. Okay, so are you using Twitter outside the Twitter chats is my next question, and my final question. So some people are using it quite a bit to ask questions, which you'll see in my notifications feed here. So these are all the interactions we've been having with people. And others of you have been using it to have conversations, which is really interesting. So it's really nice to see Beck earlier today point out someone else's post as being a really great post. So I think that's a really positive thing to do when you're part of a community as well. So really some nice interesting things happening there in the hashtag feed. So please do get involved and invested in Twitter. At the end of the semester, we're going to come back to you and talk to you about your experience of using Twitter. Partly to get kind of close the loop for you on the learning, but also for me to understand whether the Twitter chats are actually helping you to get embedded in Twitter, which is one of the reasons that we do the Twitter chats in this unit. Okay, so that is the end of my little poll for this evening. Let me get rid of the twilight zone here. Okay. Oh wait, it's still sharing. Okay. That was weird. Okay. So I was going to go through a bit of an activity around programs, products and services types, but I think we've actually got it, so I'm not going to talk about it too much more. But I did just want to say quickly a couple of just to recap some key points about the assessment and how it works. So point number one, this is all about assignment one. Point number one is that we're writing blog posts in the weeks we don't have class. So if we've got a class, then you don't have a blog post due. The posts are attached to the topic that we do for that week. So you need to write your post about the topic that we're working on that week. I think I will take us back to Twilight Zone just for a minute.
Sorry, can I just check, Kate?
Yep.
You know, we have 1 week where we're talking, and then the next week is the Twitter chat, which is the blog post week.
Yep.
So is it only about, sorry, I know I could have looked this up, but is it only going to be about the topic that the Twitter chat is about? It's not about the topic from the week?
No. No, just about the Twitter chat week. So the topic of your post is related to the topic of the Twitter chat. Yep. Sometimes I'll direct the Twitter chat in a more specific path. So the next one we've got, for example, is the reading and literacy. The Twitter chat questions focus on readers' advisory, but you can talk more generally about reading and literacy topics. And that's spelt out in the information for that week as well. So let me just give you a quick example. So you find everything you need for each week on that week's page on the unit site. I'll look at the next week that we're doing a Twitter chat in, which is the Reading and Literacy Week. So all the information about the Twitter chat is up the top, including the questions and who's participating as the Twitter chat champions. Apologies for the awful formatting here. The style sheet has gone a bit awry. If we scroll down the bottom, this is pretty typical of a week's content. There's a bit of kind of meta content from me, and then some things to read and watch. And then right down the bottom, there's the critical reflection activity. So what I've been doing is giving you a breakdown of some subtopics, so you can pick up things that you might like to write about. I'm also including a list of the different types of posts you can write each week with a link back to the assignment one page. And then each week I'm also providing some prompts in case you want to pick up the argue or point of view topic and you just want something to pick up and run with. So you don't really have an idea of what you want to talk about. You could grab one of these argue or point of view topics that I've suggested and write a post about that, either for or against, or anything else you want related to the topic. So the posts are due in the weeks that we have Twitter chats only. Then in terms of marking, we mark twice in the semester, and the first marking happens in week 7. So at the end of week 7, you'll no longer be able to edit your, well, you technically will be able to edit your week 7 posts up to week 7, but we won't be considering any edits after that date. So at the end of week 7, Claire is going to mark your posts from week 2 to 7 inclusive, and then you'll get a mark back for those. And then you'll keep on blogging for the rest of the semester, and at the end of semester, Claire will give you a mark on your posts from weeks 9 to weeks 14 inclusive. Sorry, 8 to 14. No, 9 to 14. End of week 7. So if you're not sure about the schedule, you can print this out and have it with you, or bookmark the schedule. It's a Google document. If you want a version of it that looks slightly easier to deal with, you can link straight through to the Google Doc version. It's all there. If you haven't got these dates in your calendar with a reminder on them, I would do that for sure. So end of week 7, you can edit anything you've written right up till then, up until 11:59 p.m. that night, the Sunday night in week 7.
Kaylee's asking online, did I read somewhere that I can skip a week?
Yes. You get a get out of jail free card. I forgot to mention that. So you can choose any week in the semester where you don't want to complete the activity. It can't be a Twitter chat champion week, but you can choose any other week where you don't want to write a blog post, and you can skip that week, excluding week 2 and 14. Yeah. So between week 3 and week 3 and 13, you can choose one week where you don't write a post, and it can be any week, as long as you're not the champion. Oh, yeah. Cool. So the week that you decide to skip the post, put up a post that says, I'm using my get out of jail free card this week. Yeah. Gone fishing, I'm skipping, having a nap, not writing this week's post. So there's 7 weeks between weeks 3 and 13, you can skip one. Nothing. No bonus marks, unfortunately. Yep. So if it's too hard for you to remember that you can skip one, pretend you can't and write them all. Or look at your schedule for the rest of the semester. Choose one week now that you won't contribute. Take that reminder out of your diary. Sorry. Okay, so the posts are worth 80 marks out of the 100 available for the assignment. The other 20 are for your contribution to the learning community. Does that make sense? Not clear to anyone? The whole thing? About the marks? Your blog posts are worth 80 marks. So at end of week 7, we'll mark your posts to date. You'll get a mark back out of 40. At the end of week 14, we'll mark your posts from week 8 to 14, and you'll get a mark back out of 40. Those get added together with your contribution mark, and that makes 100 for the assignment. Yep. Hang on, guys. Can we just... Yep, because it picks up you on the mic as well as... Yep. Then you'll need to broker a swap with someone for a different week. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Michelle had a conflict because we changed the dates. Yeah. So happy for you to try and broker swaps, or if you Have a look at the numbers on the weeks, and if you can make an argument to me why that we're not going to be really short on people that week, then I'm happy to be a bit flexible. Yeah. Okay. Just don't leave me with 2 or 3 people or something. It's not fair on the others. There was a lot in that week from memory. Okay, shoot us an email at the Gmail account and we'll sort it out. Cool. Any other questions online? We were just saying, so Lisa was asking, does she have to write about the Twitter chat in the week she's Twitter chat champion because she wanted to write a program review that week? And I said, yes, she has to write about the Twitter chat, but she can swap weeks if needed. Cool. Everyone got it? Yeah. Okay, I don't want to labour on it anymore because I know that most people do get it. If you haven't, if any of it's not clear to you, you can ask us a question on Twitter or email us at the Gmail account. Don't email me at my email address. I love you all and I'll do my best to respond, but my inbox is absolutely bananas. And Claire checks the other one as well, so it's much better to go through the Gmail address. Claire's much more efficient than me. It kind of does. You can see how many unread items I've got on the screen there, and that's just, oh no, you can't quite see. That's probably lucky. Rest assured, it's only from the weekend and today. Okay. Just let me get rid of the Twilight Zone. In fact, it would be nice if my inbox was like the Twilight Zone, because that kind of vanishes down there. But I don't feel like my inbox is actually going to vanish. Anyway. Okay, let's talk about the fun stuff. Meet the participatory library. Claire, I'm going to be looking at my notes, so I'm not going to be looking at the chat at all.
Yeah, that's why
I know that's why I'm paying you, but I'm a control freak.
Turn your chat off.
It's off now, I can't see it. I don't usually have an online facilitator. I usually do both myself, so it's very hard to remember to let. No, because then it goes off the recording. Yeah, all the quirks of the tech. Thank you. I'll just keep my back to it. Okay, so participatory libraries. How did we get here, and what is it all about? So what I'm going to do is talk to you about the etymology of the term participatory library, but not in the linguistic sense. I'm going to take you on a bit of a walk through some history. And it's unusual history because it's going to take us to technology. Usually when I talk about programming and products and service delivery and technology together, I always say that we have to be really careful about which comes first, the program or the tech. So there's that old term that we don't know which comes first, the chicken or the egg. But when it comes to programs, products and services, what comes first is the customer need and the product or program or service that we actually need to design, not the technology. And there's been a fair bit of bandwagonism, I like to call it, in libraries over time, where people have tended to gravitate towards the latest and greatest shiny technology without necessarily thinking about whether we've got a need for it. So you walk into lots of libraries and they'll have like Microsoft Surface tables and there'll be nothing on them, or they'll be broken, or they just won't be being utilised. And I hate the word utilised, I can't believe I just said that, used. Or you'll go in and you'll see that people have taken in, for example, a library started blogging before they even thought about what they were going to use their blog for. And I've seen this in practice. So next week we're going to be looking at a Gold Coast, no, is it next week? The week after, a Gold Coast City Council library service. It's a blog, a book club blog. And that particular service, someone said to me, oh, we want to start a blog for adult library users. We're not really sure what it's going to be. And so there's this decision about a decision about what the solution would be before we'd actually articulated a problem. And in that instance, it worked out really well, but it isn't always the case. So often, libraries will gravitate towards the latest and greatest technology without thinking about whether it's needed or what problem it might actually solve. So the technology shouldn't ever come first in programming, but we're talking about programming, and I'm going to start with the technology. So it's kind of a bit incongruent. But what I want to tell you about is what I like to call the 2.0 meme, which will take you, I guess, through, the most recent history of Web 2 and how that played out in libraries. So let's start with Web 2.0. So how do we actually get from Web 2 to Library 2? And then how do we get to the term participatory library? That's what we're going to talk about tonight. This would be much easier with print notes. Sorry. Okay, I want to share with you a quote. And it's going to be small on the screen, and there's bits not on the screen, so I'm going to read the whole thing to you, so bear with me for a second. It's a story about community and collaboration on a scale never seen before. It's about the cosmic compendium of knowledge, Wikipedia, and the million-channel People's Network, YouTube, and the online metropolis, MySpace. Clearly, this is a bit old. It's about the many wresting power from the few and helping one another for nothing, and how that will not only change the world, but also change the way the world changes. The tool that makes this possible is the World Wide Web. Not the web that Tim Berners-Lee hacked together 15 years ago, according to Wikipedia, as a way for scientists to share research. It's not even the overhyped .com web of the late 1990s. The new web is a very different thing. It's a tool for bringing together the small contributions of millions of people and making them matter. Silicon Valley consultants call it Web 2.0, as if it were a new version of some old software. But it's really a revolution. Does anyone know where that came from? No? Oh, sorry.
No.
Right when you were about to shower. Okay. So Time magazine every year do a Person of the Year. What year was this? I can't quite see the year. 2007.
World Wide Web turned 21 this year.
Yeah, that's right. So 2007, Time magazine's Person of the Year was you. And when you picked up this print issue in newsagents, did anyone get a copy? That computers, sorry? It was a mirror. So you picked it up and you saw yourself in the mirror on the front of the magazine. So it's pretty neat. Yeah, it was reflective. So there's some pretty spirited language in there, right? Like we're talking about revolution and big change, and Web 2 definitely was a significant change to the way the web had operated. And I guess for many of us it's kind of second nature now, but this was playing out right at the start of my career in libraries. So it was a really interesting time to be around, and we were all writing and blogging a lot about the applications of these emerging user-focused technologies in libraries, and it was a really, really interesting time. We used to talk about the biblioblogosphere, which was the, we're such geeks, really, was the blogosphere of library or librarian bloggers. So those of us who were blogging about the things that we were doing with technology in our personal lives and the things we were doing with technology in our professional lives, and how those two things intersected together. And there really was a real community around this kind of innovation in service delivery. And a lot of that it was all of it as a direct result of technology. And I think a lot of the conversations that we started around the participatory library and Library 2 really evolved out of this Web 2 phenomenon. So hard not to answer the comments on the screen. I'm going to keep ignoring. All right, so I want to give you a definition of Web 2. And we had a bit of a discussion the other night about using Wikipedia as a reference, which I really like Wikipedia as a reference, especially for things like definitions of technology concepts. And where else would you go for a definition of Web 2 other than Wikipedia? I think it's kind of the place to be. So, do you?
Well, anyone can put anything up there. So normally when I go to Wikipedia, I don't read what they've got there. I drop down, read the source, and go to the sources. then read what they say, not what's up there.
Yep, so good point. The sources and the reference list at the end of Wikipedia articles are really useful. There's actually been a lot of studies that show that Wikipedia is more accurate in sampled articles than Encyclopedia. Is it Britannica? The Britannica, the study is, yeah.
I'm just saying that's what I do. That's what I do whenever I have to use Wikipedia. Otherwise, I just don't use it.
Yeah, I think it's a great place to go for technology definitions, and particularly emerging concepts. And I'm going to show you in a second how this definition has evolved over time. But it's pretty small, so I'm going to read it quickly for you. Web 2 describes the worldwide websites that emphasize user-generated content, usability, and interoperability. Although Web 2 suggests a new version of the World Wide Web, it does not refer to an update to any technical specification, but rather to cumulative changes in the way web pages are made and used. Cumulative is definitely the case in terms of the changes, but we did see them peak at a particular point in time. A Web 2 site may allow users to interact and collaborate with each other in a social media dialogue as creators of user-generated content in a virtual community, in contrast to websites where people are limited to the passive viewing of content. Examples of Web 2 include social networking sites, blogs, wikis, folksonomies, video sharing sites, hosted services, web applications, and mashups. So that's a definition from Wikipedia this time last year. This is a definition of Web 2.0 from Wikipedia from around about 2008, which says, Web 2 is a living term describing changing trends in the use of World Wide Web technology and web design that aim to enhance creativity, information sharing, collaboration, and functionality on the web. Web 2 concepts have led to the development and evolution of web-based communities and hosted services, such as social networking sites, video sharing sites, wikis, blogs, and folksonomies. The term became notable after the first O'Reilly Media Web 2 conference in 2004, and although it suggests a new version of the web, it doesn't refer to an update of tech standards, but to changes in the way software developers and end users utilize the web. Now, Web 2.0, like the number 2.0. Yeah. So, sadly, I've been speaking about Web 2 and Library 2 long enough that this quotation is a screen grab from one of my earlier presentations. But you can see how it's evolved. So at the time I grabbed this capture, it really was a living term. So this was about a year into the real, I guess the real peak of the term when we saw the Time magazine article come out. By the time it reaches Time, you know it's fairly mainstream. And you can see how it's changed there. So it's gone from talking about it as being a living term and something that's evolving to something that is well and truly evolved and in place. So I want to talk you through what Web 2 actually means, or what it means for a service or a website or something to be considered as Web 2. And Tim O'Reilly has 7 principles, which I like to call principles of 2.0-ness. That's actually not what they're called, but this is how they stick in my mind. And these are the web as platform, harnessing collective intelligence, data is the next intel inside, end of the software release cycle, lightweight programming models, software above the level of a single device, and rich user experiences. Now, at this point, you may be thinking, why is she talking so much about technology? But it's going to become clear as we go through, so just come along for the ride. So I'm going to start out by just running you through each of those in just a little bit more detail to think about what they actually mean. So the first principle is web as platform. Prior to Web 2, people had operating systems installed on their computers where they had Microsoft Word and they wrote their Word document and then they saved it and they put it in an email as an email attachment and sent it off to someone. After Web 2, we have cloud-based services where you log into your Google Drive, you create a document, you edit the document in your web browser, you can be editing it at the same time as 5 or 50 other people. The document automatically saves, it has its own URL, you can share it, it can be private. So we used to operate on our computers. I remember the first netbooks when they came out. Does anyone remember the netbooks? I went out and bought myself this little tiny Asus laptop. I thought it was going to be the ebook killer. I thought it was the ebook reader killer. And these things had a Ubuntu-based operating system on them. The only software that was installed on them was a web browser, and you had to do everything in the cloud. And Google Docs wasn't particularly evolved at that point in time, so it was bloody hard. And I was determined that I was going to be really efficient on this thing for about 6 months and then gave up. And then I gave it to my next door neighbour so he could play his games on it. But disposable, like it was kind of the first real disposable tech. It was the first time that I would have ever bought a computer and given it to the next door neighbour when his computer died. But that wasn't possible prior to Web 2. You couldn't have a computer with no software installed on it. It was still pretty hard then. When did I have mine? It would have been about 2008, 2007, 2008. So no software installed, and you can completely operate in the cloud. Yeah, Leela, the kind of second and third generation of netbooks were considerably more evolved than that first generation, and they were tiny. The only plus side to it was I had surgery on my shoulder just after I got it, and it was awesome for one-handed typing because the keyboard was so tight. So what does this mean for libraries? Well, it made a big difference to the way we operate and to the types of tools that we could use to deliver services. Previously, we wouldn't have been able to imagine doing anything like having a library blog, just completely foreign concept. The evolution of the idea as Web as platform gave us license to be able to start doing things that we previously couldn't do without a lot of help from the IT guys. And that's really powerful, or was really powerful for us in libraries, because we're often within the boundaries of bigger organisations where we don't have any control over the technology. So we don't actually have any capacity to do the kinds of things that we wanted or needed to do. It also meant there were certain expectations that our customers had of the way that our technology worked. So when they go to sites like Facebook, they can just intuitively interact with the interface, and the interface works in a way that is to be expected by them. Then when they go and use our products, and our products are clunky, they find this very confronting and frustrating. So the whole Web as platform thing really shifted the way that what our customers expected of us. It gave us power to do things we couldn't do before. It also made it really difficult for us in libraries when we were giving solutions to our staff, because they had expectations around the way things worked. They expected push-to-publish technologies, and again, our systems don't necessarily deliver that. It was also really awesome for collaboration. So we would be, we'd run projects across the country, and we'd have project wikis that everyone could contribute to. It just completely revolutionised the way that we worked across geographically diverse landscapes. Jump in if you want to add anything at any point too. Okay, harnessing collective intelligence is the next one. So this is about the idea of the wisdom of the masses. This is where Wikipedia comes in, the idea that together we know more than we know individually, and that when we put all of our stuff together, then we know an enormous amount of stuff. And I think this is one of the, probably for me, one of the most central principles of Web 2. Yes, there's a lot around ideas of collaboration and community and letting people have a voice. But this idea of being able to use the wisdom of the masses is really powerful. And certainly I think Wikipedia is one of the biggest manifestations of this, but it's happened in so many different forums. What kinds of communities do you guys belong to that kind of draw on the wisdom of the crowds? Kind of descends down even to things like, I'm really into TV, and if you have a look at like the Wikipedia entries for The Walking Dead, for example, like I never ever have to suffer through half a series of bad TV again without knowing that it's going to be really bad and deciding not to watch it. it kind of impacts on every aspect of our lives. When I am trying to place someone in a movie, I will Google who they are. And I will invariably end up on their Wikipedia entry, looking at their history, looking at photos of them to see if it's actually the person I'm looking for. I think I probably use Wikipedia, maybe I use it less now than I used to, but I would definitely use it every week. Do other people have that same kind of level of usage? For everything. Like, I will freely admit that sometimes I'll read a research paper and go, I've got no idea what that's on about. Let me go to Wikipedia. And sometimes that first Wikipedia level of analysis is all you need to get access to the term. Once you've got the terminology right, then you can do a closer, better reading of things.
You know what, when it comes to films and television, I actually don't go to Wikipedia because I believe the loyalty to the Internet Movie Database.
I love IMDb, yeah.
That's my gospel, even though the people in the comment threads most of the time are absolute scumbags.
Yeah, I don't look at the comment threads, yeah.
No, but just in terms of a place where you can go to find out who was in that movie, for me it's IMDb.
IMDb is also great for the parental advisory. So I am forever on there before I can let Sebastian watch a movie, because he just wants to watch everything with guns, and we have to go check for sex and nudity and language. I can live with guns because he sees them everywhere, but I really can't have him going to school and swearing at his friends, although that is where he learnt to swear anyway. So I'm not... yeah, the Catholic school, so I'm not so sure why I bother, but anyway.
Which no one has mentioned.
Hit me with it.
The classic library example for harnessing collective intelligence in this country is Trove.
Yeah.
And anybody, if you've ever gone on and text corrected a newspaper article or contributed in other ways to that digital community, that is a massive community of library users who, many of them, text correct hundreds and thousands of newspapers to make them more discoverable and more searchable. Absolutely massive.
You guys discovered that yet?
Yeah. Also said the Internet Archive.
Yes, Internet Archive.
Yeah, absolutely, like global. I'm not actually a contributing member, but I've been on there a lot, and obviously there are kind of discussions taking place that
Yeah.
from uploaders and kind of readers.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. Chloe, is the Internet Archive with a Wayback Machine?
Sure is. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so a couple of terms got thrown around then. The Wayback Machine. Does everyone know about the Wayback Machine? Awesome archive of websites. Have used it myself when I have inadvertently deleted my entire blog to go back and get all my content. That was not fun. So it's an archive of the web. Basically, they take snapshots at points in time. So you can type in a web address and then choose a date and then go back and see what that website looked like at that point in time.
See what eBay's homepage looked like in 1997 if you were so inclined.
There's some interesting stuff. I mean, I've unfortunately had to use it for practical things, but there is some good non-practical stuff to be had there too. Trove is the interface to the National Bibliographic Database and the National Library's electronic and digitised collections, and it's also the interface now to the Australian Newspapers database, and yes, you can go on there and correct text, because what happens is with major digitisation projects, those things get outsourced often to companies in India, where what they do is they will run the microfilm through and digitise the microfilm. They use text recognition software to map the words in a text database to where the words appear on the image, so that you can, you zoom straight into a phrase, and that's how it's done. It's done with a map. But they don't do correction. And of course, if you think back to newspapers from 1850, often they were made onto microfilm. They were already pretty deteriorated. Microfilm deteriorates, so often there are errors. And the public can go and edit the OCR, the optical character recognition text, to make it easier for people to retrieve. And also, people like family historians use it in really interesting ways. They'll go in there and tag their families on interesting articles, which makes it a great resource for other family historians to find each other. It's really neat.
Very easy.
I know. I just realised that I first started text correcting in that, not last Olympics, but the one before. So it's been 8 years Since the ANBD, yeah. Since the National Newspapers Database, AND, yeah. Okay, so, which leads us to the point that the whole harnessing collective intelligence thing allows our users to be co-creators and contributors and collaborators. So it's not just anymore about us pushing information at them, but also about information being created by our users as well. So I won't talk more about libraries separately because we've had some really good examples there. The next one is a little bit difficult to kind of think of in library terms. The concept that data is the next Intel Inside, actually it's less difficult now than it was maybe 2 or 3 years ago. Yeah. A few years ago, we were kind of going, data, it's the next Intel Inside, we need to think about data, but we didn't quite see, it hadn't quite translated into reality in the way it has now. So in this new web, the money is with data ownership. So people who own the data have the power. Who actually owns the data is a big question that's come up in this context. So if you're blogging at WordPress.com, who owns your data? If you're collaborating on research documents in Google Drive, who owns your data? I know researchers who refuse to collaborate in Google Drive because they have read Google's license agreements and think that Google's going to own their research data. So it's a big question. It's still a big question. But this also is about the idea that in this environment, with the technologies that came with Web 2, with the technology, with AJAX technologies, with the capacity to mash up data using graphical user interfaces, so to get data and mash data sets together, and to do that without having any technical knowledge on how to do it. And I guess also in this kind of age of the apps where people can now build apps using graphical user interfaces, we see apps that mash up data sources as well. So this is about being the capacity to reuse data in different places and then to take it and mash it up and create something completely new with it. So when we think of mashups, we're talking about creating something that didn't exist before from two things that did exist. For example, there's this really famous example of public toilet maps related to their cleanliness. I can't remember what the website is. But it basically mashes up two data sets, something about the location of public toilets and something else about cleanliness. And anyway, you can go onto this website and it will tell you where the cleanest public toilets are near you. Now, that just wouldn't have existed before, and we wouldn't have been able to create the mashup that if we didn't have the technology that we've got now. Excuse me, like cough. So when I first kind of wrote these slides back in the day, we used to say the race is on to own the data, but we didn't really know so much about why the race was on to own the data. But what we know now is that big data corpuses are where the money is, and that this is increasingly important. So what does this mean in the context of libraries? Libraries have always been a little bit obsessed with data. We collect all kinds of data. We're not so great at using it in terms of taking the data we've got and actually using it to evaluate what we do. But we are quite good at helping others to manage it, and increasingly this is a big focus for libraries. So lots of academic libraries are moving into the area of research data management and helping researchers to understand how they can manage their data as well. Yes.
So the other thing that some libraries are getting quite good at is actually sharing their data. So the open data initiatives, which many libraries are involved in, are really powerful as far as making data available, particularly for people to take and use for data visualizations. So 2 weekends ago was the GovHat weekend around the country, where government data was released to developers, and they had 48 hours to do really cool stuff with it. And there's some amazing stuff. I'm going to post one in a minute that uses the convict index from State Library and plots the ships that came out. It's really cool. But certainly Queensland Government's very big open data initiative, and nationally there's a lot of push from governments to actually make data available. And there's lots of really cool stuff that people do with this. the open data really got a big push internationally when the Obama government came in 8 years ago. It was something that they put on the agenda. And so this move to actually making publicly owned data, so data owned by governments, and a lot of libraries are funded by governments, so their data belongs to the public, and actually making that available in a way that can be used is something that a lot of libraries, particularly in the state and national level, are involved in. Sorry, that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. That was a good 2 cents. And I forget because it was a long time ago, but jump on libraryhack.org and have a look at the Library Hack Initiative. It was probably 2011. Yeah, it was a while ago. It was a national initiative where libraries released data sets, and it was not a promotion, like a national program.
It was a national project.
Yeah, so National and State Libraries Australasia. If you jump on YouTube and look for Library Hack in QUT, you'll see a bunch of videos created by a QT project student and I about Library Hack. And it's a good introduction to why this is actually important for libraries as well. Libraryhack, HACK.org. And also have a look on YouTube for Library Hack. So that's, I guess, how it applies to us. All right, end of the software release cycle. This is about the idea of perpetual beta. So products coming out in beta mode. Until not too long ago, a couple of years ago, Google used to have beta written above the Google logo. So Google was essentially calling itself as in beta for like a long time. It was only a couple of years ago, wasn't it? Yeah. So what beta means is that, or beta, it's out there for use and comment, but we're never calling it final. It's never the final product. And so the idea here is that we just push things out and let people use them and feedback, and the development process is ongoing. So we're no longer releasing version 1.1, we're just releasing it and letting it evolve as it goes. Mm.
Like if I created a card game as is, I find that like other creators will be out first, these guys don't look like this.
Yep. So things go out for alpha testing first and then beta. But the real revolution around Web 2 was that things went out in beta and they stayed in beta, and including Google for many, many, many years. And then there was the idea as users as co-developers. So the idea that people can actually get in and edit source code and contribute back to the software that they use all the time by improving it and releasing their source for other people to build upon as well. So what does that mean for libraries? Well, first of all, what we translated perpetual beta into is this idea that we should let go of the idea of perfection. So in libraries, we tend to want to get a product absolutely perfect before we let our customers anywhere near it. We don't want to, we're perfectionists. We like things to line up and we like things to be neat and tidy and in their place and to perform the way they expect it to perform. But we used to talk about the end of the culture of perfect. And I think we still talk about it, but around this Web 2, I guess this idea of perpetual beta gave us license to talk about end of the culture of perfect in a really big way, and that is exactly what we did. And we tried to treat our users as co-developers, so letting them use our products before they were 100% perfect, and letting them contribute back to those products and contribute to the development process. Yes? Yep. Yeah, so the question was, is it easy to move people away from the mindset that things should actually just work and into helping to develop? Yes, it's very hard to move it's harder to move staff away from the idea that people will think that things are broken and they shouldn't be, they should just work. So I think for me, working in this space at this time, the biggest barrier was not around our users saying, because honestly, they'll find something to complain about anyway if they want to. So, I mean, you may as well make it something real. Like, as long as nobody's going to get injured or whatever, I mean, who cares if, like you don't want to roll out a new library management system and have it come crashing down on day one, and I've seen that happen and it's not much fun. But who cares if some I's aren't dotted in the right place and that little logo is off to the right a little bit and, oh, this unexpected advanced search doesn't work quite the way we thought it would. Because people actually do want to contribute. And in libraries, we have the very unique position of being in organisations that people are bought into. If they are our users, they generally love us and they want to engage. I did a non-user study for a public library service a few years ago, and it was so hard because when you're in libraries, you just see engaged users who are engaged. If you try to survey people who aren't engaged in the library, there's nothing for them to want to contribute to because they don't see the library as having any value to them. So why would they spend their time to go to a focus group unless there's an iPad up for grabs, in which case they will come. But it's really hard to find them and reach them and get the message out to them. Yeah, hundreds of donuts, that's exactly it. And so that was a real eye-opening experience for me because I guess I'd worked in libraries for long enough that I saw people have goodwill about libraries. That's why councils love libraries around election times, because libraries are one of the few things about councils that people have goodwill about. Libraries and parks, right? Everyone's got a gripe about the roads, the rates, the garbage collection, all of those things, but we love public libraries. So it's surprisingly easy to get customers to buy into this stuff, but much harder to get staff to buy into it. Much harder to get conservative management to buy into it too. Exactly, yeah. But you never let it go out when it's like super duper bad. I've seen things go out, but in those cases they thought they were right. So, Lisa, did you have something?
No, I was just, because I just finished my placement at Logan Central Library, and I thought it was really interesting how many outreach programs that they've actually had to try and get non-users engaged, like through all sectors of their users, like from early childhood right through to adults. And
yep.
They would just go to so many events, like trying, and then they'd collect the data. And I was just really interested in their the push to get people to realise that there's some use for the library for them that they don't know about.
Yep. Logan are really good at it too. They're very outward focused. I've worked on some projects with Logan City Council and they've always been amazing to work with because they understand the value of the outreach. So I did a project with them on a QT Engagement Innovation Grant where we partnered with one of the high schools to get, it was a literacy program for their National Year of Reading, but to get their kids onto campus as well. So all of these kids would be first in family if they went to university. Huge refugee population in Logan, so it's really, the outreach is really, really important. And they're very good at engaging with schools, which a lot of public library services aren't. So they've had really great youth services librarians there for a number of years, one of whom I hope will be joining us for the Twitter chat on reading and literacy. She's not there anymore, but really, really great people. Yeah, it is. And the inspiring thing about it is they keep at it, even if they're only hitting a handful of people each time. And because they keep at it, then they can connect the dots and it all comes together. Yeah, it's really powerful. Okay. Give me 1 second because my next slide has the wrong title, I just realised. Okay. So this should actually say lightweight programming models, not end of the software release cycle, sorry. And this is about programming in the technical sense, not library programming. This is about the way systems get built, software gets built. It's about how data gets syndicated, so things like RSS that allow us to subscribe to get updates. These are like revolutionary technologies. Like we all lived in our Google readers back in the day, subscribed to, I would have been reading 200 librarian blogs and monitoring those constantly through through RSS. And the syndication gave us the ability to connect with each other and to keep on top of what was happening in the space.
Sorry, I'm just trying to be confused. What's the difference between number 4 end of the software release cycle and number 5 end of the software release?
It's supposed to say lightweight programming models. Sorry. No, my bad, and I said it quickly. Remixability, going back to that idea of being able to remix data and loosely coupled systems. So this one is harder to see some of the linkages for us, but going back to the, well, I guess integrated library management systems are coupled systems, but they're not very loosely coupled. But we are starting to see change in the product marketplace around some of these concepts. It's a fairly tight marketplace though. Lightweight programming models. But it's not the most important, so don't worry too much about it. Follow on with the next one. Okay, software above the level of a single device. This one's really important. This is about, have you heard the term device agnostic? This is about content that will work on any device. So it doesn't matter what device you've got, that it will work on any device. This was revolutionary at the time because we were working with vendors like Overdrive, who had the majority of the marketplace for ebooks and e-audiobooks, and because of digital rights management issues, the content could only be used on certain types of devices, usually excluding Apple devices. So this idea that software could work across devices was really critically important. It was really important to the way things were evolving over time and related to that idea as the web as platform or operating system, because when things work in the cloud, when they work in your web browser, then they are more likely to work across different types of devices. So these are things that we had to consider when we were creating collections around e-content, and when we were trying to position ourselves to help our users with their electronic devices, and when we were trying to develop services that lived on the web. When we were designing our websites, we had to consider that things needed to work in all these types of environments. And around this time, we started to see talk of HTML5, which one day, hopefully, will be the standard. When I first started teaching the unit that's now Online Information Services in 2010, we were talking about HTML5 becoming the standard by the end of the year. It's still not the standard. But HTML5 holds lots of promise for device-agnostic applications because it does away with having to use media players. It does away with Flash. And it makes the web technology work across different devices. Things like, you know, when you're using a form on your mobile and you get to an email address field and the keyboard changes so that you've got the @ symbol and the .com, that kind of stuff is coded with HTML5. And so HTML5 was really critical in terms of this idea that we weren't just designing for a single device anymore. One of the big barriers for us in libraries was that, and is in a lot of cases, that we're still working with older technology, particularly around library management systems, particularly libraries that don't have lots and lots of money to upgrade to the latest and greatest. Okay, rich user experiences. So this is the idea that the role of the user in Web 2 is much richer than it used to be. They're not just consuming content anymore. So when I started working in libraries, our websites were like brochures. It was like the place you went to find out when the library was open. Yeah, some of them still are. But I recall when I started my last job in practice and I was doing some research before my job interview. I looked at their website and I was like, oh my God, do I really want to work here? And thankfully, we changed it fairly quickly. But you know, in those days, that's all that was there. They weren't service delivery channels. Websites are now service delivery channels to greater or lesser extents, depending on where you are. But more importantly, our users don't just, or well, more importantly with Web 2, users don't just passively consume information, they're actively creating it. So people blog, are you guys into YouTube? I've just become a massive YouTube user in the last year, and I'm not going to tell you what I YouTube because it's probably slightly embarrassing, I just realised before I started that story. So, I've got this new Sorry? I am a real person. Really? Yeah, I'm never off it either. I am a stimulus junkie, so I have always got something running, a podcast or YouTube or whatever. And I might catch like 1 in 20 words, but I like the noise. So I like to watch scrapbooking videos on YouTube where people have cameras set up over their desks while they scrapbook, and they talk you through, they film it, and then they speed it up and they do a voiceover. And they talk you through their design decisions and why they're doing what they're doing and how they did their mixed media and blah, 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 blah. It's got this enormous community around it, and I am now, Kaylee, you should see my recently watched videos because Sebastian was logged in on my account on the weekend. It's all Nerf battles, and all the recommendations are Nerf battles or football. I hate it when he pollutes my recommendations. It drives me crazy. But there's this massive community around the scrapbooking stuff that I just can't, like there used to be forums and stuff and people knew each other, but this whole Web 2 thing, all these people have blogs, they all have YouTube channels, and you see them interconnected across blogs, YouTube and Instagram, and also Pinterest. And you see the same names in relationship to the same people popping up all over the place. It's so interesting. I think I've got to do a research study on it. Yes, how they use different platforms, yeah. Yes. Yes. Yep, they use different platforms for different things, absolutely. But yeah, it just is amazing. Like, who could have ever thought? Like, it's crazy. And I recently just subscribed to a class, and these people are using Vimeo to hold the content that's subscription only, and then all their other content goes on YouTube. It's just really interesting to see how this works. But yeah, kids reviewing toys, that's another one, and they all follow each other around as well. I don't know how these kids, EvanTube, does anyone's kids watch EvanTube? This kid is so articulate with his Lego reviews, and I don't know, if you put any normal 7-year-old child down in front of a video and they can't have a camera, they can't have a sustained dialogue like that. I don't know how they teach them to do it anyway. Yep, still. Not just used to, still. Sebastian watches it obsessively. Stampy Longhead, long nose, one of those things. Dan TDM, oh my God. Yeah. And they essentially are just watching these people Minecraft. It's amazing, but the stuff they learn from it is incredible. I will confess to having watched a few Minecraft videos myself to up my game a little bit. So, you know, people are creating the web now. Like, it's this interconnected mess of people creating the web. And I very rarely, like, what else do I do? Banking? The rest of it is all user-generated content that I engage with online, really, and shopping. Those are kind of the two things that I tend to do now. And anything else where I want interaction tends to happen on Twitter. So people are adding value, not just consuming. So what does that mean for us? Well, we had some examples before about how people can engage with our content by text correcting and all those kinds of things. But also, in the example that you'll look at in a couple of weeks with the Gold Coast City Council Libraries book club blog, we used to have patrons actively contributing to that. So they'd put posts up, book reviews and things. It is, you know, it is distinctly possible to get people to contribute to the library online, but, and this is a good segue, but also in person as well. So this is not just about online. This is about these principles of Web 2 and the way that they change the web and how libraries have picked them up and translated them into all aspects of what we do, not just what we do online. So Web 1 can be thought of as web as information source, and Web 2 can be thought of as web as participation platform. So that's a really short version. So if that's the case for Web 2 versus Web 1, what does that mean for libraries? So if Web 1 is web as information source, does that mean that Library 1 is library as information source? And if Web 2 is web as participation platform, does that mean that Library 2 is library as participation platform? So in a nutshell, Web 2 equals the participatory web, and Library 2 equals the participatory library. It's just that Library 2 lives offline as well as online. So this is actually a slide from a presentation that I first gave in 2008 around this idea of Library 2. And at the time, I was blogging about how much I hated the term, because this is the kind of discourse that existed around Library 2, and I found it really hard to stomach. So we know what Library 2 is and is not. Library 2 is user-centric, yes, okay, so that agrees with the whole Web 2 thing. Library 2 is constant change and evaluation. Yep, that kind of sits with the Web 2 thing as well. But Library 2 is not just about technology, and Library 2 is political, so less about the political. But if we think about the idea that Library 2 is not just about technology, I really struggled with that at the time, because if you went to any conference and went to a paper that was about something related to Library 2, you would get people talking about a technology implementation. And I think the term Library 2 did us a massive disservice. So we didn't come to a collective definition of what Library 2 meant. People were saying it wasn't about the technology, but we adopted technology language by saying Library 2.0. 2.0, that's an inherently technology vibe.
And the technology is the easy way.
Yeah.
I feel like people go, you know, oh, we're engaging with a participatory library or whatever because people can put comments on our Facebook page.
Yeah.
That's so not it.
That's such an insightful comment. Did you guys hear it online? Okay. I'm gonna make you say it again, Sheree, because you said it really good. I probably should have just got you to say that at the beginning of class and saved the Web 2 tour.
I was just saying that I think, what did I say?
Technology is the easy way.
Yeah, people associate it with the technology, and it is the easy way out. And so many organisations are like, oh, we've got a Facebook page and people can comment on our Facebook page, so we're a participatory organisation. But it's so not it. It's so far from actually real meaningful contributions and participation.
Yep. So it was really frustrating because we were talking about the fact that it wasn't just technology, but every time you saw someone talk about a service that you might consider to be Library 2-ish, around this time it was very much focused on technology. So this is exactly what I wrote in my notes in 2008. I'm going to read them to you because I think it was reasonably insightful, though not as insightful as Sheree just was. Okay, so in my view, failure to come to a collective definition is damaging, and I think we need to throw out the term Library 2.0. Is the concept any good to us if it's open to so much conjecture? In the last few weeks, much conversation about what Library 2 is and trying to come back to a pure definition of it. Oh, that was a dumb note, Kate, that didn't even make sense. So in the last few weeks, there has been much conversation about what Library 2 is and trying to come back to a pure definition of it. We've been re-emphasising that Library 2 is not just about technology. But to my mind, the term Library 2 is irreversibly wed to technology by virtue of the term. By picking up the 2.0 meme, we've married the concept of Library 2 with the concept of Web 2. No, it's not just about technology, but technology is a core component. Show me a Library 2.0 project, and I'll show you a project that has a technology-based component. Do we hear about Library 2 projects on story time with physical books, not e-books? Book clubs of the physical kind, not the blog kind. Not in my experience, but these things could feasibly be seen as Library 2 projects. So what does this tell us? To me, it says that Library 2, for a lot of people, is irreversibly, irrevocably wed to technology. That was from the Library 2
Beyond the Hype conference.
Beyond the Hype conference, yep, which Claire organised. Yes.
There are a couple of people.
Yeah. So that was a fun conference, actually. So it was a conference called Library 2 Beyond the Hype, and so I thought I would use it as an opportunity to talk about hype and hyperbole. But I very much believe that the term Library 2 is an awful term, but people still use it. So essentially, I want to talk about what the participatory web is, and the participatory web is these things. And these words came from the definitions of Web 2 and the Time article that I read from earlier. The ideas of conversation, openness, iteration, transparency, user centricity, collective intelligence, being focused on creation, being democratic. I've got a question mark beside that because I don't actually think Web 2 is necessarily all that democratic all the time. Participatory, responsive, dynamic, and community focused. And so if we think about the library, what do all of these things characterise? And I think we can say that they characterise the participatory library. Neil just made a really good comment, which I'm just going to switch back to here so I can see it. Won't be a sec. So Neil just said, all of the words on the slide could be applied to technological advances. Yes, that is essentially my point. So these, did you mean these words on this slide? Cool. Yeah, so all of these words can be applied to technological advances, but they can also be applied to participatory library, which is really where I wanted to go with this. The idea is that what we took from Web 2 at the time was a whole lot of the technical aspects. A lot of the things we were blogging about were our forays into using Web 2 technologies, either in our personal lives or in our professional lives as part of our jobs. And so we were talking a lot about the technology. But when we boil it down to the characteristics of the participatory web, the characteristics of those tools that we were blogging about and using and trying out in our service, in our practice, these are those characteristics, and they are the same characteristics as the participatory organisation. And then they can apply in any context as well.
So I'm just thinking of like a potential example of this. What this makes me think of as far as library spaces is a lot of the move towards user-centred design and the redesign of libraries around the place. And you'll see that evident even in the QT library. Some of the changes that they've made to their buildings, those of you who have been here a couple of years, and how they've really moved towards making places that are more focused on creation focus, about what users need on different places, about getting feedback from users, about being more transparent about how that feedback's used. I think that's fair to say. I'm not going too off track here.
I agree. So I think Cherie's right. We do see this stuff playing out in physical spaces, but it is harder to do. There's some really interesting writing around museums, participatory museums, a couple of good blogs around as well. And I think it's really important in this space to look beyond libraries at what other types of organisations are doing as well. You're just a bit too far away.
Sorry.
And I can actually jog now on the silly foot, so I'll take advantage of it.
I just want to say that it's quite interesting because I've done a lot of reading on museums about this, and in the museum reading it's not connected so much to the Web 2.0. It's really connected in that literature about making that being relevant to the community today, and how do we keep ourselves relevant and how do we keep our museums viable in today's society. And that's the background of participatory museums, more so than coming from this web point of view. So I just found that really interesting.
Did you read the Participatory Academic Libraries article this week?
Which one?
The Lynn Ewan?
Yes, I disagree with you.
Oh, do you?
Well, I felt that he was undemocratic and he was snooty because he didn't think about the people like you were talking about earlier, the people who don't participate. So Lisa was talking about Logan and how do you bring people into the space.
Yeah.
And the other guy, Stein, talked about, how you want to make everyone a guest in your home.
Mm.
But Newen was, look, I saw what he was doing, but he didn't talk about the disenfranchised, which is, and the people that struggle to be part of a library.
Yeah. Was that the comment you wanted to make? Yeah, cool. That's really interesting. And I'll tell you a bit about how Lynn did that study. The only reason I know is because we did our PhDs at the same time using the same methodology. except he used the more systematic. There's a couple of versions of my methodology. One is a bit more creative, which of course I went for, and the other one is a bit more systematic, which Lynn went for. And this methodology, grounded theory, you go out and recruit people who've got experience with the phenomenon. So if the phenomenon is the participatory library, you recruit people who have experience with the participatory library, which is a limitation on your findings. So that's probably something that there's not enough space to talk about in a journal article, but if you look at his thesis, you'll see it acknowledges the limitation. But if you have a look at the literature around participatory libraries, Library 2 and academic libraries, you'll find it's a bit of a theme, because when you have an academic library, you've got a captive audience, and so people tend to be less concerned about non-users, because there's this assumption that you're on a university campus, you've got assignments to write, you'll use the library. It's a dumb assumption, but it does happen. And so it does tend to be a theme across the academic library literature. And I think you'll see national and state libraries, research libraries, archival libraries, kind of engaging more with this, because they have the kinds of collections that lend themselves to things like exhibitions and programming around those collections. Programming in academic libraries is not quite as interesting or exciting. I shouldn't say that. Lots of good information literacy programs around. But let's face it, it's not story time, and it's not putting up an exhibition and having people come and see that and engage with it. So it is a bit different. Yeah, which is where I was going when I said, did you read the library? So it's a very nice synergy. Nice to see that.
I do think it's important to make the distinction, though, between engagement, community engagement and participatory library, because when you say participatory, it sounds like people are participating in events, but it's more than having people come to your story time or having people come to your activities that you're putting on in the library. It's having people involved in the creation of those events and steering those events. And
So the next step is actually, it could be quite scary.
Yeah. So say rather than planning a workshop and then inviting people to come to it, it's going to saying to the community, well, we have this space and we can help you. What would you like to come in and teach?
Yeah. And how can we support you to do that? And also also knowing your community and being able to exploit what your community does and what your community knows. And so I'm working on a project at the moment with a couple of your peers, which I'll come back to in a second.
Is there maybe a connection between the direction that participatory libraries are going towards and maker spaces? Because I think about maker spaces and I think about like the eBay Etsy revolution, and I've always seen a really strong connection between teaching people how to make and letting those people go off and monetize what they make.
Yeah. Definitely. There's definitely a connection with the maker movement for sure. And that's something, so later in the semester we'll probably do a tour of State Library, and last year we went and looked at the business studio. Is that what it's called? Yeah. You talk.
Okay.
She knows more.
Okay, so I was just going to give an example of, I guess, one of the participatory things that State Library is doing, which is the business studio. So the business studio is space, Monday to Fridays, people can come and work 9 to 5. And basically use it as a home office, if you like. But from a participatory point of view, one of the programming activities in that space is a fortnightly activity called Lunchbox Forums. And so every second Wednesday, someone from that business community comes and shares their expertise. So these are not people from State Library. These are people who are running small businesses, who are entrepreneurs, who might be that little bit more ahead than the person who's just sitting there with their laptop trying to get their first startup grant going. And so these are people from that business community, startup community. They come in, they spend 45 minutes sharing their expertise and make connections and network. And so there's this whole sort of level of community building going on that doesn't need a librarian to intervene. It's people connecting with other people who have a shared interest.
So, So nice being able to walk fast.
No, I want to talk about Logan again, but they use their space for a ukulele club, and so they have that every week, and it was fantastic actually. Like all these people, a huge turnout because there's somebody that wants to run it and is a very good ukulele player, and I think they had about like 30 people in there.
Ukuleles are quite big in library circles. All the cool librarians play ukuleles, not me, but the very, very cool, the hipster librarians play ukulele. And I don't use that term hipster in a derogatory way. They're cool people and they play uke. And they take their ukuleles to conferences and it's quite fun. So I was just going to give another example of... What's that thing in October, the name of which I've forgotten? Oh, Fun Palace. Yes.
So Fun Palace is a participatory community engagement activity that has come from outside the library world, but it's been adopted by libraries because it sort of taps into the STEM goals of a lot of funding bodies for libraries. It's come from the UK. It's about 3 years old. It's been in Australia for the last 2 years, but it's about one weekend in October every year, spaces being made available for people to come and do something within that science, technology, arts, engineering, mathematics area, and just share it with people. So State Library got involved last year and they'll be involved this year, and we support a number of public libraries around Queensland to do this, and also partnering with other organisations. But again, it's not supposed to be about people in libraries or museums or galleries going, this is how you tear a book apart and do really cool stuff with it. It's supposed to be more about, a dad come in and going, I'm really good at building kites and I'm going to show a few people how to build a kite, or whatever it is that they like to do, or bringing on, saying, oh, this is a robot I made at home and let me show you how I can code this, or whatever it is. So it's about trying to get people from the community to come and share their knowledge in a hands-on way, and and do the whole science is fun thing, which is supposedly cool.
It is cool. I had a quote in my diary and I was trying to find it, but I can't find it. So QUT Library is running a Fun Palace this early October. Yep, Stacey Francis and Kirsty Roberts are doing it as their IFN 701 project. So there'll be a call for you guys to volunteer as well. So it'd be very cool if some of you could volunteer. You could use it for your prompt for either the Makerspace Week. Probably Makerspace Week would be most appropriate, I think. Yep, you could definitely use it in your professional portfolio. So the idea is that they're going out to QUT clubs and saying, they're looking around the university and saying to people, what do you do that's really cool and what can you kind of teach other people to do? Anyway, we had a meeting with Matt Finch, who's tied to the Makerspace movement in the UK and is currently, Creative in Residence? Creative in Residence at State Library of Queensland. He's Dr. Matt Finch on Twitter, really interesting follow. And he phrased it in a really good way. He was like, it's not about what we can do, but it's about saying to people, what's your passion and how can you help other people to have an experience of this thing that is your passion? So we're toying around with all sorts of ideas for starting to sound more like Woodford Folk Festival. So we're toying around with all sorts of ideas for what activities might run, but the idea is that, people get involved and participate and do stuff, and so it should be a really fun event, I think. But yes, it's this idea that it's not just about engagement, it's about getting people to actually create the library, which is really hard, and it's hard to hand over control to people. And we tend to be quite controlling people in libraries by nature.
It comes down to, it's really easy for us to program things for our community because we think we know what they want. It's slightly harder to program with the community, to have them alongside. It's really hard to have programming done by the community, which is where we relinquish a lot of control. But that is really about what, like, that's the ultimate extreme end of participatory libraries.
Yeah. And I think you only know what your community has to offer when you do what Logan does, and you really engage and reach out with the community, and then you know what's out there in your community. You know what people are into, you know what clubs and societies exist, you know all of that stuff about your community. Yes, build up trust, build up networks. It takes time. In public libraries, often programming teams are centralised, so there'll be a central team of people who do the programming, same at Logan, same all around the place. But it's really, really important to have people in the branches involved in the programming because they know their communities better than the people sitting in administration in most cases. Yeah. Yeah, Brisbane's huge. It's the biggest public library service in the Southern Hemisphere. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it does. If you do have a look at their programming, you'll see lots of uniformity. Look, it's really hard, right? Because if you're in a centralised programming team, one of your concerns is control and quality. No, not control, quality control, right? To make sure that people have a good and consistently good experience from branch to branch. And so often what that ends up being is genericized programs that are run across the service.
There are some very passionate, I'm thinking of an Annalee Library.
Oh, I'm not talking about Brisbane at all, by the way. I don't actually know much about the organisation, but it is really easy. It's much easier when you're in the position of authority centrally to program for the whole service than to let people have control.
Yeah, nothing against Brisbane City Council either, but I think Cherie is definitely right. You can see in some particular Brisbane branches where they don't have the resources to go off-grid with their programming. And then you can see others like the Central Brisbane Library has got a fantastic range of programs, and I do think part of that is to do with the resources you have available, but it's also to do with the captain who's steering the ship. And I think I can't remember her name. She's she's so fantastic. She's got so much going on, particularly on Friday nights, because she's got a very good understanding of who's using that library. And that's really, again, what it comes down to is having that dialogue with your community and knowing what they want and what they're going to use your building for.
Yep. Absolutely. And being prepared to let them use the building. I think sometimes we get scared too that if we kind of open it up as a free-for-all for anyone who wants to use the library's meeting rooms to use the library's meeting rooms, they'll never be available when we need them for X, Y or Z. And I've seen that as a challenge in some places. Okay, so that is the participatory library in a nutshell. And it's going to lead in really nicely to what we're going to talk about next week. And Claire was talking before about user-centred design. Next week is a workshop, and it's only going to be on campus, and online there is an online version of the activity for people to complete outside class time. I may put it up in advance of class. It may not be up in advance of class because I often like to tweak it after we do it in class. We changed the schedule. Remember I talked about it at the beginning of class? 5 and 6. I might have said 6 and 7. I can't remember, sorry. But yes, there's a class next week. It's on campus only. For online students, there'll be a video that runs through the activity that we're going to complete. Sorry, Leela, I missed. What was your question about? So you'll work through the activity in your own time and complete it, post to your blog. Otherwise, if you can make it in, come in. It's a fun activity to do in person. Did I miss something important? No? Okay. So class next week, on campus only. Activity will go up online probably after class because I will invariably want to tweak it. In the meantime, you've got nothing due this week. Hooray. And thank you for sitting through the long and winding story about Web 2 and Library 2. Does everyone feel like they've got a good foundation in where that's come from? Cool. The guys were saying before about the readings. have a read of the 3 things that are there, but specifically the not the new one. If you can only read 3, leave the academic libraries reading and read the other 2. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, if there's any questions, you know where to find us. You can tweet us or email us at the Gmail address. Otherwise, have a great week, and we'll see you next week. No worries. Did you guys online have any questions, or are you all okay? Bye, guys.